So this is, we talked about Scrum for 2 weeks, and now we're going to talk about Kanban for 2 weeks, which is an alternative approach. This is the Bible on Kanban. Kanban is a method that was actually developed by the author David Anderson, who's an independent consultant who's worked with a number of large software firms, including Microsoft. And Kanban evolved from his experiences with Agile and some of the challenges he saw with Agile, including the difficulty getting organizations to adapt to that change in model. And the fact that, as we talked about before, certainly the Scrum method is really focused at an individual project, right, as opposed to what most organizations are doing, which is lots of things at once, right? So if anybody wants to borrow the book at some point, be sure to get it. I promise I will leave it when I leave, probably. All right. But before we can talk about Kanban, we need to remember what Scrum was about so that we can do a little comparison, right? So certainly Scrum adheres to the Agile Manifesto, and we'll find out that, in fact, Kanban does, but in a very different way. We have the iterations, remember, called sprints, variable length, most typically 2 weeks, but can be 6 weeks, whatever works for the organization. It's an empirical approach, right? Which is reliant on transparency, inspection, adaptation, right? We talked about all those things. And the biggest thing about transparency being, turning my phone off. Free communications, right? Being transparent in your communications about the problems you're having, so that as a team you can solve them and move forward. And as we already talked about, it usually works on a single project. We talked about the key team values, and a lot of these also will apply in Kanban, right? There's in Scrum, right, there's the 2 week sprints at the beginning of each sprint. After the planning session, everybody commits explicitly to the sprint and to the content of the sprint that's supposed to be completed. Talk about courage, right? Working together to get the job done, and working always with respect, right, for each other. And then we talked about, again, the focus. So it's really on one project, and you only are working on that sprint and that project or product, whatever it is, at one time. And of course, we talked about the daily stand-up meeting and the fact that that's a key session to make sure that the team is focused on, that we know what's going on, and that you basically focus on those 3 questions so that problems can be resolved and everybody knows what's going on that day. You'll find out that there's a stand-up meeting in Kanban too. A little bit different, somewhat different focus, but essentially the same purpose. And right, there's a real firm structure to the sprint, right? Whether it's 2 weeks, 4 weeks, or 6 weeks, basically it starts with the cycle plan. You get into the actual daily routine. In the middle, sometime, you spend some time doing backlog grooming, right? So that you're better prepared for the next sprint when it comes up. And you wrap up the sprint with a demo to the stakeholders, right? You do a review within the team as to what went well, what didn't go well, and then you do a kind of a retrospective that says, what can we do better what should we change for the next time we run the next sprint, so that hopefully we continue to incrementally improve the process. Everybody remembers all that, right? Any questions? And the framework that just kind of replace what we just talked about, right? So that's Scrum. So now we'll talk about Kanban. Some key characteristics of Kanban that are different than from what we've talked about in the Scrum model. One of the key ones, and one of the ones that drove David Anderson in kind of evolving this method, was that he could introduce this model into an existing development environment with minimal disruption, as opposed to saying, okay, we're throwing away the way we do everything, and now we're going to go to this 2-week fixed sprint model, and that's a lot of change to absorb at once. A lot of culture change to try to do it. Now, this is still a lot of culture change, but you're able to put it into sort of an existing development model and kind of ease into it more than you can with Scrum. It's not iteration driven. So this is a continuous delivery model. But you still do have regular, there's continuous delivery, not iteration driven, but still regular delivery of code. So it's a continuous process, but you see there's kind of an accumulation of done, if you will, and then code releases, if you will.
In this model, can you still evolve the product, or is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It's still adaptable. It's still each change is a positive thing.
More features, the final set of features.
Correct. But one of the key things, I think, for us is this. It allows you to have multiple work sources and multiple types of work going on in the process at the same time. Remember we talked about in Scrum, like you're usually working on one product, one project. Multiple sources here we're talking about. So we could be working on multiple projects with different sponsors, stakeholders at the same time. And types, talk about that. So we have all kinds of work here. We have project work, we have break-fix work, we have critical tickets, right? All of that can be factored into this model much more easily than it can in Scrum. Classification of work items. So I just talked about it right here. You have tickets, you have projects, you have critical tickets. You can classify the work. You can make explicit decisions about how you're going to allocate the capacity of the team. You can say, I'm going to allow, based on the experience we've had, that I'm going to allow, making this up, 40% of the capacity for break-fix, 40% for projects, and 20% for, I don't know, rework, whatever, okay? What you don't do, and we'll talk about this later, is explicitly allocate capacity for critical tickets. You treat those as one-offs and you absorb them when they come. All right? So that's sort of the expedite work item that you see listed there. The underlying key enabler for Kanban is limiting the amount of work in progress. Big challenge here, right? when have we ever, and the team, obviously the management team is working hard at it now, right? But managing our work in progress, you know, how often and historically have we then been able to say, no, we can't do that, right? You have to be able to say, we can only do this much at a time.
And that's what you mean by that?
Yes.
Keep the work scope so it can be delivered.
Right, exactly. Contain scope and pull work into the process as
you have capacity.
correct.
Okay.
But this is the iterative, right? So it is like,
No, you said it's not iterative.
No, it's not iterative. It's a continuous model.
But I'm assuming this also gives you the tools to identify that you're maxed out, so it's more obvious and you've got the detail to back up that something else has to move for this to fit in.
There's, yes, you will, and again, it's sort of a learn as you go, right, process, but you'll see that there's still the concept of cards representing work. Constraining work in process means constraining the number of cards in process at one time. There's a card wall from Scrum. There's a little more explicit card wall for Kanban that helps you identify backlogs, things like that. And so there are mechanisms there to help you start identifying problems, improving the process, and increasing the efficiency.
I think we can get together too, right, as we start to introduce some of the stuff, identify things that we put in place within our team to kind of police this or make us, allow us to be successful. So, I think one of the things we'll have to do is we start to take on some of this is make sure we could maybe give the brand our objective is how we're managing it and ask for support. And, having to workload to say what we're making, right? So that's a really good question.
so how does Kanban handle unexpected work that just spring on you when you are already in the process of work?
Obviously can adapt, but what that means is I'll talk about two types of unexpected work. One is what I refer to, right, the critical ticket that comes in. Right, that just goes into the process. Yes, it's going to impact what's going on. You don't necessarily reduce the work in progress. You just add that one in. But you sort of have a rule that says you only have one of those going on at a time. Right. And fortunately, we're at a level of maturity where pretty much we can operate that way now. Right. But otherwise, if something comes in and says it's a higher priority, something stops, working process stays the same. Yeah. The recipe for success, according to David. Focus on quality. The key one, reduce the working process. Deliver often. So, with Scrum, you deliver often at 72 weeks, at 4 weeks, at 6 weeks, whatever you set. Here, deliver often happens slightly differently. Okay? But you still want to make regular deliveries so that, one, you're showing the business that you are producing. Okay? And to reduce the work in progress, obviously, that's the challenge to the management team. To balance the demand against what our throughput is as a team. Which comes back to prioritization. And over time, this method will allow you to see what are the backlogs, what are causing backlogs in the process, what's causing things to vary and improve the process so that it gets more efficient as time goes on. So there's nothing in the manifesto that talks specifically about quality. So why focus on it? Well, across the industry, poor quality code is the biggest negative impact on productivity.
I think, I'm assuming, but I'll check with you because you've obviously read this, is I'm assuming by poor quality code, he's really talking about a broader issue of code that just doesn't meet the requirements.
Doesn't meet the requirements, it was pushed out so fast that it was not tested adequately.
The whole system, it just doesn't do what the person thought it would do. Right? Whether it's coded wrong or defect or wrong requirement or both. Right. The whole thing. Right. And you see the second bullet there, which I thought was pretty amazing. Lots of teams spend up to 90% of their capacity fixing defects. Yeah, that's crazy. That's wild, isn't it? Think about right after we went live. Look at that reality. That was reality for quite a while. Fortunately, we're not still there, but think back to then and you can see how that could be the case. And of course, there's things we can do to improve quality. And his favorites are here. And most of these you'll see really focus on multiple sets of eyes on the situation, right? So code inspections, right? So peers looking at the code, seeing if they see an error in the code. Somebody may come in who has had some experience in an area that the person's working on, and they have a better way to skin the cat from their experience that can be applied. So code inspections can be very helpful, right? Collaborative analysis and design, same thing, right? You work as a team, you bring multiple sets of experience together to get a better result. You object-oriented folks know about design patterns, right? So that's not so much you working collaboratively with each other as it is you leveraging the experience of a bunch of people who evolved those design patterns over time. So again, it's leveraging multiple sets of experience. Professional testers, well, we don't have that. We don't have that benefit, but certainly if you're a product house, a Microsoft or a IBM software group, yeah, you have to have professional testers. We're turning our PAs into professional testers. But again, having that skill. I'm assuming you can take that and say just more for production approach to testing, whether or not we eventually use something like GitHub test framework or something to make this easier or more comprehensive with the same resource.
And repeatable,
right?
So that you know.
So I think we could probably over time try to improve our ability there. Just that we're not hire.
We're not going to have to hire people. Right.
So now the first two techniques, code inspection and collaborative analysis and design, does the book talk about the time frame or when these need to be done? At what phase of the project do you do the code inspection?
Well, you know, it's all part of the process, right? The collaborative design says up front, right? You're doing your analysis and design. Mm-hmm. So depending on what's going on, it's an opportunity to bring a few people together and brainstorm the approach so that at least how somebody's going to go about it, they take away from a little bit of a collaborative piece of work, right? Obviously, code inspection would happen before you take the code and throw it over the wall to the testers and say, hey, it's ready. People look at it, whenever it seems like the right time to the development management team.
And we do some of that today. I mean, just maybe not every single time, but whatever it is today. We absolutely do that on our job code for this production. That's an argument. But we do it elsewhere too. So I'm just enjoying both of them. I'm sure other people do the same.
We do peer reviews on things, but not like 100% of stuff. Like
Right.
some things you don't, because it's like a remedy, take a fix real quick. But
I'd be interested in exploring like whole Kanban process and see if that can be integrated.
So back to the fundamental enabler, which is constraining the working process. Here's an example here, which actually realized that he actually did this. David did this. He was at Microsoft in 2004. There was this XIT business, you know what that stands for, but it was a group actually of developers in India who were doing work for Microsoft. They had that's the worst productivity in the company. Their typical backlog, the lead time to get something out of that team was anywhere from 125 to 155 days. He introduced an agile approach, which was evolving towards Kanban, okay, and over 5 quarters took 125 days down to 25 days.
That's great.
And the team got engineering excellence award. So it can work now. I'd love to have David here. Yes, okay. One of the things about working process is you get things done, right? I've got this much to do, not this much to do, so, you know, I get it done. Understand it. Feels good. Went out, right? Not, God, I've got 25 things to work on, and I can, you know, I'm multiplexing so much that I'm inefficient, right? You have so many things going on that you have to switch to the next subject, and it takes 45 minutes to an hour to get your head back where you were, right, before you can resume being productive again. So, constraining the working process provides that increased productivity, reduces the multitasking inefficiency. But the other thing is it makes much more visible where the inefficiencies and the problems are in the process, so you can attack them and address them. So, so that's one of the big things you'll see about the whole Kanban process is and it's in Scrum too, right? Iterative improvement. But there's some specific structures in here that help do that. In Scrum, you do your review at the end of your 2-week cycle, right? And you say, well, what could we do better? Well, this is a continuous model, right? So you don't exactly have a fixed review point. But there's other vehicles built into this that allow you to see where the problem areas are, and so you can address them. So how much work in process is it right now? And as always, it depends, and the fact of the matter is it will change over time. Counterintuitively, when you start, you want to have a higher level of work in process. The reason being that you don't have a really well-oiled machine going yet. So more things are going to run into blockers and have to have the blocks removed. So that takes time. And the last thing you want is people sitting there idle waiting to do something because something can't get to them because there's a blocker. So you actually run initially with a somewhat higher level of working process, and as you get more efficient, you bring it down. And he says ideal is about 1 or 2 items, cards, per person on the team at one time is where you want to get to. You don't start there.
So that's 1 or 2 items is like 2 tabs.
I'm sorry?
1 or 2 items are like 1 or 2 tabs per person.
2 cards, yeah.
So it wouldn't matter who it is. If it's Steve, if he's only involved in 1 or 2 things
It's got 2 cards.
at the time.
Right.
So same thing like anyone on the team. So you know, like when first starting it says higher because you're probably trying to taper down to that.
Yeah, you don't want to, you know, if you're just starting the process and you've got two, and you guys we aren't experienced at it yet, we're going to bump into stuff. Okay? And we can end up with both those things sort of stuck.
Right.
So instead, maybe you have four. I don't know what the right number is. It's important that it be agreed with the team, and this is where Don already said it, right? Plans buy-in. It's going to be central to the success. Oh yeah, there's a card wall. It's like Scrum. Not quite the same card wall. It provides more detail, so that you get a little more insight into what's going on. And it models the development process in place. I said up front that one of the things that David was looking at when he developed this method was a way to introduce it that was less disruptive than dropping Scrum. So initially, you just make the card wall follow the development process that you're already using. So, okay, you're doing the same basic process, you're introducing some constraints on work in progress, you're getting some visibility through this wall, and then you incrementally improve, and you may change the way you're doing things over time, but you don't just drop people to get in and have culture shock all at once. So, and a key thing here is the wall includes buffers. Basically, there's queues, right, between each major step in the development process, and those are the things that both smooth the workflow, but also will help make the challenges that you're having very visible. Okay. So here's an example of card wall, all right? So there's the input queue, basically the work ready to get pulled in, analysis and design. There's a buffer. This work ready to go into the development team, goes into development, development team's done, it's ready for test. When the test team has bandwidth, they pull it into test, and then it could be released ready right now. We could have UAT, whatever steps we have in our process, it would be reflected on the wall. This is just sort of a process, but pretty much what we do. So, and what I'm going to show you here, obviously, is if we started from zero. The reality is, when we get through here, you'll see stuff flowing all the way through. That's the way it will be all the time. But, so, a couple things go into analysis. They threw another thing into analysis. They said they're going to have two things going on at the same time in this case. There's something that's ready for development. Development's ready for it. They pull it in. Now, analysis got another thing done, so there's two things now waiting for development. And so it moves through, right? Ready for test. The ready for development queue is empty. But there's a couple things going on in development, so not a problem. And so it goes, right? Until everything's done. But of course, what you actually have is that whole thing going on. And this is where you get visibility, right? When you get a card wall that starts looking like this, oh, now I got things, there's nothing, well, they put something into analysis, but development is the backlog. Right? So we need to address the bottleneck. Why aren't we able to get more work through development and figure out how to fix it? One of the things you also do on these card walls is you use different color when you physically use a card wall. You use a different colored stickies and things like that indicate what's going on. So you might have a yellow sticky that indicates, oh, this is a story that's blocked. there'll be something written under it that says why it's blocked, right? And so the whole board will have, the team will agree on what are the sort of indicators we want to have available and how we use them and use them consistently so that when you come in the morning and you look at the board, you know exactly what's going on.
So you mentioned stories about the thing, the reason why.
Pardon?
When you said stories about the saying the reason why people got called.
Stories are related to requirements, actually breaking it from bill.
Right. Remember our cards, story cards, same.
So you're basically flagging that particular requirement or feature is blocked.
It's blocked. Can't move for one reason or another. They can't move forward on it.
Right.
Wow. This is a lot faster than I thought. Good. Here's the stand-up meeting. Guess what? Still 15 minutes. But it's around the card wall. And so you focus on what you see on the wall. What's blocked? Why is it blocked? Who needs to do what about it? Right? There's a backlog. Why is there a backlog? Is there something we can do to relieve that? Identify issues, you log them, you assign them. Some of them will go to the project manager because there are things that have to be addressed perhaps by him, her. Some of them will be assigned to the development team. And you keep it to 15 minutes. There'll be some topics that will come up that will require more discussion than you can do in 15 minutes. And you, like in Scrum, you set those aside, hold the people who need to discuss that further for a little extra time after you release the rest of the team.
So you think it's a good idea to actually have a physical card wall? Like we can look at it, especially as we start to do this.
I would say for the initial
As opposed
few
to
months,
using a tool.
right. I would definitely start with the
Be
physical
used to
card.
then discipline and stuff.
Right.
But do you have multiple ones because there's multiple things going on, or is there one
Just one team.
Yeah, it's really what
per team?
One per team.
one of the things we have to do is we have to find what the team is and what their scope is.
Correct.
Right now. Sharon had one for the portal, that would be a team.
Right.
And one for HR, that would be a team. More discrete than that.
It could be, but you could have it.
You had two different stories going on, they're both HR projects. That's two different teams.
Not necessarily. No. Remember, a story is a requirement, right? Remember back to Scrum, right? You write a story. A story is a requirement in a product or a enhancement, or in this case, the story may, in fact, not be a story, but a bug, right? A remedy.
So your wall is, so Dave Turner has three different projects he's working, three different requirements, and Raju is the developer. Your wall is all three projects, all three requirements, and Raju, you see every one that Raju's working on.
The wall would be all about GT. So you get a GT example, right? So the team could be Pam, Wesley, Review, Dave, four people that discuss GT the most. That could be the team. The wall could be all about GT, right?
And let's not forget, change management.
I mean, that's the challenge.
Right.
I really think we devoted to a particular development team, which is sounds like you guys are thinking about the cross-team things don't get any benefit from the process because we can't be, so I think, I understand there's so much going on that one board would be difficult.
Right.
But if we go to one, like the development team for the board and.
Well, that's not development. The GT wouldn't be development. I mean, that's fine.
But we would have team members that are working on HR and
Right.
finance.
Yes, you would.
Right.
Change management, that's the biggest
We
challenge.
do it every board. And
You cut it across every single one.
Yeah. So, I mean, I.
But like you did today, you try to assign a person who's working supporting a thing, so.
No, I can't do that.
So
It's a design base, I only have 7 people, so.
No, but if I'm doing a given project, right, you usually say, oh, Jackie's going to work on this.
Yeah.
Right.
But I'm looking for benefit also from this method, because that's a real challenge. It doesn't, because those different boards don't coordinate with each other as far as delivery dates or whatever, and then, the whole team decides, okay, we're going to bump this to the next, I don't know what it's called, Kanban method, it's not a sprint, but, or however it works.
Right, so something may get set aside that was in process, right, because something higher priority came in.
I mean, it's the same problem we have now, is that individual team bumps it out, not thinking about the fact that we're already booked for that week for training.
Well, that all has to be, that the team has to be, the
But it's
team has to be sensitive to that problem, right?
So we could potentially adopt a methodology that makes us more efficient as a functional technical team. We may not help them much unless we take extra care to figure out how to make their life easier as well.
Or just have some kind of, the idea is the requirement, but not just trying to understand the how. In our data center, we don't have data center that's not blocked. I mean, is this like take a backlog to say, okay, here's all the major projects and ready on this project? Is it something just this requirement?
Right, the individual requirements basically are each of those little green cards, right? So if there's, like, if we were having this stand-up meeting right now, there would probably be specific conversation about that. Because it's flagged, we know there's a problem, we have to address it.
I can relate to this because right now we have performance management and the field development which is responsible for project. Because performance management is higher priority, right now I have a story that is blocked from the EVA.
Right.
So I would have something on the development.
Yeah, but Bill, isn't that totally neat? So I'm trying to figure out, I mean, we're trying to, so there's helping our team, and then there's helping, I need shares of formal, I need Anita for change management and communication. So where are we doing the wall for that?
But that's a very good question.
This story's lost. So Anita is going to be delayed, and she's got to start revamping hers, or Sharon is going to be delayed and revamping hers.
Right.
The ideal is to have, and the most realistic is to have a tool that we have separate Kanban projects, but can that tool merge separate Kanban projects? And that's what they were.
And that's what you guys.
Well, that's what
That's what
we're thinking we do, but I think for a new process, it's important to walk it out on paper first. I think it's to get used to it.
Eventually you would use Jira or...
With the thought of, whether it's, I've got 2 groups, and realistically one divides up into 2 or 3 completely different areas. So if we're talking 20, realistically 20 boards, you can't merge those.
No, I think you have to.
When I got 2 people that are working on 10 different projects,
You can't do that.
still 2 people working on 10 different projects.
That's right. You can't. So you can't have that. Right? You have to work within. You have to define a team.
So that's part of
Let's go.
our challenge here is to how to lift this off. It's to think what's going to work for everyone, right? So maybe that we don't have 10 boards just focusing on how to make it on. So we have to. I think we have to take the training, and we need to. If we think Kanban is our best avenue, we need to then strategize and say, all right, how do we make this work for us? And what do we need friends help with? How do we deal with groups that are not horizontal or we have verticals? Like I need this team. It's definitely horizontal. You get everything. Even at times Sharon's teams like that, right? So how do we manage that to make them also productive, or not less productive, hopefully more productive, right? So we need to figure
And more aligned with all of the different projects instead of playing catch-up constantly,
Exactly.
which is what we do.
So I think it's just important for us to try to think how this approach works and then see if we agree we want to take this on and then figure it out. We're going to have to take it off the theoretical and make it practical.
Correct. It's never going to be pure.
And I think
This is the pure model.
Right, so we'll ask Bob to help us come up with something that we all try. And then if it probably won't work perfectly, we'll have to adapt.
I don't want to, I think this is great, because I have seen it really work in the past, and it's been great for our team, so.
But the intent is clear, but we got to make sure that the intent actually
Yes.
ends up the way we intended. We don't close anything, right? It doesn't do good if I win and you lose.
That's right.
We need, more win-win or we lose it, right?
And this is more reality, because it's multiple things going on at once, instead of the thought that any of us have resources that we say, 2 weeks, this is all you're doing.
Well, this seems to be a little bit less about the 2 weeks and more about continuous working without methodology.
Right.
So, that may be more or less attractive to certain people. But
Yeah, and I think
this is helpful. At least, you get a lot of questions and comments, so clearly, at least we're paying attention. Better than some meetings.
So that's really all I was going to cover today. So, any other questions? Next one.
Yeah, I know the question I had. So you may cover it later, maybe space on it. So it's just, I know it's wrong, but knowing that was impact teams.
Right.
It's dedicated people, I should say. Right. I had to name 3 developers, 4 functional people, and then maybe change that person. That's these people. That's it. So I haven't heard that said yet. So what's the thought process with Kanban? Is it you need to commit to a capacity, but I could have someone half working on this and half doing something else, or what's the thought process?
It's not, I don't think it's as stringent as the Scrum model is, but there still is the idea of having a fairly, a focused team, right? If we have the reality where we may have some people who have to work on more than one team.
Right, that's kind of what I'm getting at.
But
I'm not even just thinking about sharing Anita work, which is definitely a concern. But even for some of my folks, there might be the need for them to do other stuff other than work on a team.
we have to talk about that. So, because we'll have to say, if we have this model, and the model supports different classes of work, what would they
do that?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I'm not thinking of that fair enough.
Right.
But,
And you have the risk if you split them across teams. One of the big things here is constraining working process so you're not multitasking too much. So you risk doing
There's
that.
that visibility. You know, and I think we did talk based on and shared stuff. We said, I don't think we want many of these teams.
You know.
And you're going to lose efficiency because there's too much cross action. So we'll have to think about that. All right, let's get into it. Thank you.
I think one possibility would be, I like the, got what you call it, where it's like the work gets stacked and then it gets pulled to the next.
Yeah, the queues, yeah.
And that might be something that we could leverage, like from share a team of mine. We pull work from there and it's ready to go out. But the thing that is kind of we agree to is the release date. So that would say it won't be released until the change management.
Well, you could add another buffer almost, right? After the test day, you could add like a pre-release buffer, and that's what you do. Yeah. Some autonomy to kind of work with release and release.
I mean, I could,
Just look like it was that way to do it.
you could decide that there's some point where there's a parallel.
Right.
There's some point where you guys can pick up your work while some of this other stuff is going on. Typically, when it's ready to go here, you're probably waiting to work. Right? So there may be a little test team management.
So I do think when the training's over in a few weeks, we'll have an session to talk about how to apply it. And just spitball stuff, and everyone's being really important to figure out, all right, how do forget about who's going to have it first, but how do we want to implement it? and we'll have some thoughts. This is very helpful though, and it's definitely different than Scrum, obviously. Is that the book we bought or is that a different one? We bought one.
Actually, I think I bought this one.
Okay, and it's one that Fran bought, right?
One that Fran bought was
It's
on
more
estimation.
general.
Yeah, it's on estimation, sizing estimation. Yeah. I think this is actually is my book, but I'm not letting you do Kanban in retirement, so I won't.
Get away with that.
All right.